the call.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, your weekly call-in town hall and radio show. I'll be on the air for the next hour to answer your questions. I'm here each Friday. Today we're actually doing a recorded, we're live, but we're doing a recorded session so we can play this when I'm off next week because I'm going to be on, some of our staff here are going to be on vacation, so we're going to take the week off next week. So we're going to record today and play it for next week, but we will be back on the air the Friday after that. So you can still tune in next Friday for the same exact show because you're going to love it so much today that you're going to want to tune in against next week. Again, this is State Senator Amanda Chase, and I serve you in the State Senate. And today here in the studio, I have two very special guests with me. I have our very own Chesterfield County Police Department Chief Cheif Katz with us. I also have John Dugan, who is a paramedic with Emergency Solutions. He's also an adjunct professor with John Tyler Community College, where my son goes to school. And we're delighted to have you as well. So we invite you to listen today. We've got a really great show for you, really good information. And I'm going to start with Colonel Cheif Katz, who I've really enjoyed getting to know over the last year. We worked on some legislation together this week, and we've had a lot of incidences going on this week that some of those we're going to share with you. But I just want to give you a little biography about Cheif. Cheif actually has 29 years of service in law enforcement, and he was sworn in on January the 2nd of 2018, and he is actually Chesterfield County Police Department's 8th chief since its formation in 1914. And he comes to us from Florida. And, Cheif, it's so great. I should call you Colonel Katz. I know you keep telling me to say Cheif.
Yeah, just call me Cheif. Yeah.
I always say just call me Amanda. But anyway, it's a pleasure to have you on today. Certainly appreciate you being here. And John Dugan, who is our paramedic and someone I know who's a good friend from church as well. And appreciate you coming on today, too.
Thank you for having me.
So we've had a lot going on this week. First of all, I hope everyone had a happy 4th of July. And I understand, Chief Katz, that you were actually at the Chesterfield County Fairgrounds as well.
I was, yes.
That was an incredible turnout. There were probably, I think you said on your Facebook page, 5,000, but I've heard 7,000 as well. So somewhere between 5,000 to 7,000 people. And I was there with Ryan McAdams, who's running for Congress. He just won the Republican nomination. And I was passing out cold water bottles that said Chase for Senate on it. Passing it out, cold water, right? And so it was great to see so many people coming out to that event. And we were there right at the entrance as everyone was coming in. And special thanks to our Chesterfield County Police, our Chesterfield County Sheriff's Office, and Chesterfield County Fire and EMS for keeping the event safe and enjoyable. And they actually said that was probably the best crowd as far as behavior was concerned that they'd ever had.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any problems that we had. And I'll tell you, coming in all the way down Route 10, my wife and I were both just mesmerized by the number of people that were just lining the streets and camping out in parking lots with their chairs. And I've never seen anything like it. It was really wonderful.
It's an incredible event. And with the Chase family, it has been a yearly tradition for my family until this year. And my kids all went to South Carolina. They were with friends at the beach. They didn't get to go with us this year. But I appreciate the volunteers that I had to come out and help us. And so that was a really, really good time. Speaking of fireworks here, I know a lot of times people ask about fireworks and are they legal, are they illegal in Virginia, what's allowed and what's not. And so I thought we would just quickly talk about that. I guess I have to know this because I'm a legislator.
Right.
It's good for us to know this. But consumer fireworks that are permitted are sparklers, fountains, pharaoh serpents, pinwheels, and whirligigs. And what are prohibited are firecrackers, skyrockets, torpedoes, and other fireworks which explode, travel laterally, rise into the air, or fire projectiles in the air. So, yes. And it's interesting because I remember my first year in office, there was legislation to say, let's legalize fireworks in Virginia, but it's already legal.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they're looking for more than just sparklers. So
Yeah.
And I think even, whenever Ed Gillespie was running for governor, I think that was also one of the things that he had pushed for when he was running. But unfortunately, sometimes, with the best of intentions, some bad things happen. And I just want us to remember Brendan Mackey and the tragedy that occurred there in Brandermill. And it's interesting, 5 years ago on July 4th of 2013, Brendan was walking in front of the Boathouse restaurant in Brandermill with his father. And my family was actually there that same day in Brandermill. And they were on their way to see the annual fireworks show at the Swift Creek Reservoir. And without warning, a bullet dropped from the sky, striking the 7-year-old boy on the top of his head. And tragically, he later died in the area hospital. And so, we just want to remember that celebratory gunfire has consequences, and it claims real victims. Indiscriminately firing bullets into the air is dangerous and illegal. And so, do you want to make any comments on that at all? I mean, that just...
No, I mean, I think you've said it well. That I'll tell you, that is a case that we have not given up on, and we're not going to give up on. It's been 5 years, as you've said, and Brandon was 7 when he was taken from us. But I can tell you that is a case that the Chesterfield County Police Department maintains interest in and will continue to. We've had detectives out as late as this week, scouring the neighborhood and canvassing and asking anybody for any information they may have.
And it's just so senseless, shooting up into the air and, what goes up is going to come down, right?
Sure, yeah.
I remember that day very vividly because my husband and my son had just gone to the bathroom and they were over there. And I remember looking because I had my other kids with us. And I looked out and I saw the lights from the ambulance. And I remember thinking, what in the world is going on over there? And my husband later told me he was within seconds of being at the same place. Mm-hmm. And my son walked by and saw Brendan, laying on the ground. And so it was very traumatic. It's, to hear about it, and to see it is just even, it's a difficult situation. So our hearts go out to the Mackey family. We remember you. And I know that there were actually, Brendan's law actually passed in his honor and in his memory, and it's now his legacy. And it was actually a huge victory in 2014 with bipartisan support in the General Assembly. There was legislation that was passed, and the chief patrons were Todd Gilbert and Betsy Card, both delegates, and Delegate Roxanne Robinson also signed on. I was not in the legislature at the time, but as a result of that law, there now be harsher new penalties for anyone that is caught recklessly handling a firearm which seriously injures another person. House Bill 810 will crack down on those people who fire weapons in the air during celebrations like New Year's Eve or 4th of July. And the bill was actually named, obviously, in Brendan Mackey's honor. And it was actually, if you break Brendan's law, you will face a Class 6 felony, which carries up to 5 years in prison. So definitely we hope that discourages people from doing that, because we don't need any more incidences like that. So I understand you need a few good people in the police department to sign up.
Yes.
You guys are actively recruiting right now.
We are. As of July 30th, when our next academy starts, we're going to have 12 positions open. And we've got authorization from the county to actually hire up to 15 people over staff, because about 17% of our workforce is eligible for retirement. Mm-hmm. And it takes about a year to select, train, and deploy a brand new officer. So we need to be able to operate without skipping a beat. So we've made some progress in the last 6 months in terms of our recruiting, but we've got some more ground to cover, and I'm really encouraged by our momentum.
So someone that's listening on the air and they're thinking, boy, that might be an interesting profession, something I'd like to go into. What are the requirements to be a police officer? Well,
you've got to be a U.S. citizen. You've got to have at least a high school diploma or its equivalency. We really want you to be at least 21 years of age. Generally, if you're a little older, probably better. Of course, I got into this job prior to my 20th birthday. In fact, when I went to the police academy, my grandmother had to buy my handgun because I wasn't old enough to buy a handgun. Generally from life experience, we'd like you to be a little older than 21, but 21's a minimum. And, and we're looking for people who have a service-oriented heart, that they're interested in helping the community and do something that's rewarding and meaningful. You'll never get rich doing this job as far as money is concerned, but the rewards, the intrinsic rewards are countless.
And I understand, I know everybody wants to know this. The starting salary is $44,289. Is that still the case?
That is the case, yes.
Okay, fantastic. And how long is the training?
34 weeks in the police academy, and then there's a field training program that lasts several months.
Okay, very good. Very good. Well, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase, Colonel Katz, and John Dugan. We'll be right back right after the break. All right, you're tuning in with Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. I'm State Senator Amanda Chase, and here in the studio today, I have our very own Colonel Cheif Katz with us, as well as John Dugan, who is a paramedic with Emergency Solutions. And we're here today to talk about a number of issues. We're talking about recruiting, and the Chesterfield County Police Department is actively recruiting their first class. Their next class begins on July the 30th. And we were saying that you have to be a U.S. citizen, you have to have at least a high school diploma or equivalent, and be 21 years of age. And if people want to go online, what is the website they would go to?
They go to chesterfieldpd.gov.
Very good. So if you're interested and that sounds like something that you would like to check out, definitely go to that website. I know Colonel Katz would love to interview you, and his team would. We're going to talk next about the Police Athletic League, and that is an outreach effort to connect the police officers with youth in the communities that they serve. And the Police Athletic League, they actually started in 1910 by the New York Police Department. They now have chapters in more than 700 U.S. cities, and they serve approximately 2 million children annually. And now both Richmond and Henrico have already sanctioned what they call PAL programs, which are typically geared toward at-risk youth in the urban settings. Now, I understand y'all had a little kickoff. Tell us a little about that.
We did, and I'll tell you, I'm very excited about PAL coming to Chesterfield County. Before I was a police officer, I was a PAL kid. My actual first exposure to law enforcement was through sporting events, through our PAL program in the city of Plantation, where I grew up. And so very excited to have PAL here in Chesterfield County. We're kicking it off. We just did a football camp with 4 former or current NFL players, probably about 150 kids. We've done a baseball camp. We have a soccer camp coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we've got a couple of camps coming up, and we're just kind of looking at the different sports and seeing what kind of response we get from the community. And then we're probably going to stick with one and then and go with that. But I just filmed a video this week internally for our personnel to introduce them to the concept and to ask for their volunteerism.
I think it's very innovative because in such programs, the police officers, you guys function as the coaches and the mentors for the children in hopes that they're going to avoid some of the negative consequences like drugs and gangs.
Yeah, what we find is a lot of the lessons you learn on the sports field really transcend into life. When I spoke with the kids this last Saturday, I shared with them, make sure that you're a good teammate, own your conduct, own your role on the team. Don't let your partners down. Follow the rules, play by the rules, because if your team gets penalized, it's bad for everyone. And those kind of lessons, ownership, learning to win graciously and to lose the same way. These are things that you can take off the sports field and use in life and on the street. And a lot of times the kids that we're working with, they don't have those influences in their life, in their home lives. If they don't learn them, those lessons from someplace, then quite honestly, we're going to be dealing with them in the future and not in a positive context. So it's a real good investment in helping some promising young kids develop into their full potential.
Well, I just think it's a fantastic idea. And Rosalinda Rivera, I understand, is the president. she's also a good friend. She's actually been on the show as well. She's with New Life for Youth. She's the director there, and she has some other programs that we've been working with on. But the Chesterfield Police Athletic League, it was created officially earlier this year as a non-stock, nonprofit corporation with a 6-member board of directors led by President Rosalinda Rivera. And I understand that Bill Harding, who is the general manager of Ironbridge Sports Park, actually donated the use of the indoor facility for the youth clinic, which is great.
He did. It was a remarkable facility, and it was a very well-attended event.
I love how the community comes together. And my understanding is that Ironbridge Baseball Academy director Matt Laney and several of his coaches gave their time to teach the children the fundamentals of throwing, hitting, and fielding. So that's great. That's wonderful. So the Chesterfield Police Department is funding, and I think is it Rick? How do you pronounce his last name?
Rick Cremonese, common spelling.
Rick, yeah. I'm glad you said it and not me. So thank you, Rick, for doing that.
Yeah.
His position is executive director, and also Clover Hill District Supervisor Chris Winslow, who serves as the board's treasurer, and its secretary is Lori Scott from New Life for Youth. And I'm just so excited to see this program come about. And I understand that Rivera's husband, Rosalinda Rivera's husband, Carlos, are the two other board members that are on that. So, that's such a great idea. So many kids, especially the at-risk youth in the urban settings, they see police, unfortunately, sometimes, and in a situation in which maybe a parent, is having an issue with drugs, or even what we've seen a lot this week with domestic situations, domestic violence. So it's good to see our police in a positive light. I don't know what's going on with my voice. It just started here. What I want to talk about is you have a Facebook page that people can if they wanted to follow you and they want to find out what's going on in Chesterfield County. I love that you have your own Facebook page on there. And on that, you were talking about this gift card scam that's going on right now. Tell the folks a little bit about that.
Sure. We've really seen this all over the country. As you know, I was a police chief in West Palm Beach, or in Palm Beach County, Florida, before I came up here. And we saw it down there, too. It's this Green Dot gift card scam. And basically what's happening is people are calling folks up on the phone, and they're saying, hey, I'm with the IRS, or I'm with the county sheriff, or they're giving some sort of a story as to why you need to give money right now. And you need to go to the store and get a Green Dot card, and then call back with that information, and then we'll release your loved one, or we'll provide medical treatment to your loved one. Sometimes they actually what it's called spoof a phone number for the caller ID. So it'll come up Chesterfield County Jail, and the person will say, I'm, Corporal so-and-so with the Chesterfield County Sheriff's Department, and, your son has been arrested, and, we need money to bail him out. Or we're with the IRS, and the IRS number will come up on your caller ID, and that tends to scare people. The overriding message is this: if anyone ever calls you and claims to have a position of authority, and they want money via a Green Dot card, call the Chesterfield County Police Department or your local police department and let us know, because no legitimate entity is ever going to ask for payment over the phone with a Green Dot gift card.
And what is a Green Dot?
It's a prepaid credit card, more or less.
Is there a green dot on it?
There is, yes.
There really
I think that's actually the company name,
Okay.
but it's a common used, and any prepaid card, if a prepaid Visa, American Express, don't do it. No legitimate entity, IRS, Sheriff's Department, Police Department, nobody's going to ask you for money via a prepaid credit card. It's a scam.
Now, I think you have a song that goes to this, a Taylor Swift song that goes to this. Do you care to sing that for us?
No, I don't. I'm pretty sure you'll be fined by the FCC if I do that.
I love it on your Facebook page. He's got a song on here. You'll have to go to his Facebook page so you can read his song. I think it's hilarious. It's good that you have a great sense of humor.
Thanks.
We have to, because we have to deal with things like performance crime legislation,
right? Yeah.
Which is something else that we've been working on this week. We had a meeting. If you all remember a while back, tell folks a little bit about the hoax crime, just to jog their memory.
Sure. A couple months ago, we had an incident where we were investigating an abduction in front of a Walmart in Midlothian. And we worked on that case for about 24 hours and actually set aside a homicide investigation that we were in the midst of working to work this abduction where we believed a young lady had escaped from the trunk of a car and was recaptured and placed in the trunk of the car, and people took off. And as it turns out, the entire thing was a hoax. And when we found out about that, I asked a public call for some assistance in drafting some legislation. You were kind enough to respond to that call, and we've been working on it. And the public has been very enthusiastic about that as well.
And we have another meeting next Thursday, and we're working with the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. We're working with your office, Chesterfield County Police Department, and we're going to have some legislation. And hopefully at some point in the near future, when it's not ready to be talked about yet, but we want y'all to know we're working on it. We're working like team players. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Cut to the Chase. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in today with Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. I'm your state senator, Amanda Chase. I serve you all in the state Senate, and I have this weekly call-in town hall, and this is a recording, so you just save your calls for next time. But I did want to have some information on here. I want to continue to be consistent every Friday that when you tune in from 6 to 7, that you're able to get information about what's going on with your local, state, and federal government. The next thing I want to talk about, I was able to attend an EMS healthcare roundtable with Delegate Tommy Wright, Amelia County Administrator Taylor Harvey, and members of the EMS community. Blanton Marquise, who's the CEO of Emergency Service Solutions, and Daniel Lincolns, who is the Department Chair of EMS Education at John Tyler Community College, and John Dugan, who is here in the studio today, is a paramedic and adjunct professor for John Tyler Community College. And they presented us with issues, concerns, and solutions for emergency medical services as it relates to the overall picture of our healthcare system. Sometimes I'll go to meetings in the community just to hear, what's going on, and maybe their ideas will bring needed attention to the services they provide and could potentially lower healthcare costs. So I look forward to assisting our Virginia EMS professionals with legislation this upcoming session. And John is here in the studio today to discuss some of those ideas. So, John.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on today. And everybody at some point has been thankful that there was an EMT that helped them with their healthcare issues. Tell us what types of things you're seeing on the front ends. What is the most common type of issues that you all see?
In emergency medical services, we see everything from a medical emergency to a trauma, whether it be accidental, a kid falling down, or you or me tripping on the sidewalk, or a medical emergency from a chronic condition to an acute condition. And so because of that, the EMS community, whether it be an EMT or a paramedic, we have to be trained to a huge, wide range of specialties. And, that's the key, because you just never know what you're going to be. It's kind of like a police officer being called to, an emergency situation when Cheif Katz was here. You don't know. It could be as simple as, a fireworks standby where someone could get sick from heat. Thank goodness you passed out water, right? Or they could get, really sick or just injured. So we see the full side of things.
And I know in our conversation that day, we were talking about the incentive for EMTs and emergency ambulances whenever they're on the scene. Sometimes they get paid, sometimes they don't. And we were talking about in order to get paid or get reimbursed for a service that the EMT, the ambulance, has to actually take the person to the hospital in order to get reimbursed.
Yeah, that is very true. And that's the model that has been created over years. Now, EMS as a profession is very young. It's only about 40 years, 50 years old. And our current program, or the way that we are reimbursed from insurance companies, whether that be Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance companies, is for transport. And, that's a good thing. But it's a fee for service. And so we could provide a really high amount of service and do all the right things and take care of you. If you're a diabetic, I bring your sugar up, I get you some food, we take good nourishment, we make sure that you're healthy, and you don't need a trip to the hospital. Whatever the case is, you forgot to eat that morning, you took your medicine, we get your sugar back up and you're healthy and you're going to follow up with your doctor. We've done everything right, but we will not get paid for those services we've rendered for the last hour and a half. So that's the challenge that EMS has. We are a fee for service, very similar to a taxi ride.
Now, one of the things that really stuck out to me was sometimes you'll go to a call, you'll get someone will dial 911, you go to their residence and you treat them there, and you don't have to take them back to a hospital. And in those situations, y'all don't get paid.
Yeah, and so that's exactly it. We don't get paid if we don't transport. And the only places we can transport are to the hospitals. We can only go to certain hospitals, which means as a consumer, it's the highest level bill you can get, right? You're going to an emergency department. I can't take you to a clinic or someplace else that could see you, treat you, and then it would be maybe healthier for you. Currently, regulations and how we run and is that we have to take you to an emergency room, which of course is a higher copay and a higher expense for the doctors and the hospitals, rightfully so, right? I mean, it's the highest level of care. And I think we talked about it on that day. We are the catch-all, right? If you were to call your dentist's office today, what's the recording you get before you even get anywhere? If this is emergency, please dial 911. If you call your primary physician, before you hit the button, I need an appointment or I need a nurse or whatever I need, the very first thing they say is, if this is an emergency, call 911. So we're always that first answer, oh, hey, we should call 911. So, which leads itself to getting a lot of calls that may or may not be appropriate for emergency services.
And that was one of the things that we talk about. What percentage of the calls that you all get on 911 would you say are not emergency related?
They've done studies, and on the back end of it, in true emergency, I believe it's very, very low. It's like 15%. It's very, very low. And how much the true percentage of true emergencies. There's a lot of times we're needed. People don't have a ride to the hospital or whatever the case is. But that would be another thing in the future, right? Could we arrange them a transport without an expensive ambulance trip where we're billing them several $100s or more depending on the level of care?
And so I know one of the things that we talked about, and we're getting ready to go to a break here in just a minute, but one of the things that stuck out to me as a consumer, we're always talking about quality of care, but also in addition to the cost of care. And so if we are looking at the ability of someone that is an EMT and, they're trying to determine the quality of service, we want to talk about that, also the cost. So we'll be right back with more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. We'll be right back.
Lately, I've been losing sleep.
Welcome back to Cut to the Chase with State Senator Amanda Chase. And I also have John Dugan, who is a paramedic and adjunct professor for John Tyler Community College. And as I mentioned earlier, I attended a EMS healthcare roundtable with Delegate Tommy Wright, Amelia County Administrator Taylor Harvey, and members of the EMS community. Also, the CEO of Emergency Services Solutions, Blanton am I saying that right? Marchese? Marchese. I am really messing up his name. I'm so sorry about that. Daniel Lincolns, and he's the department chair of EMS education at John Tyler Community College. And so we had a really good discussion. We were trying to come up with ideas that would bring needed attention to the services that provide and could potentially lower healthcare costs. So let's talk about some examples of lowering the cost.
So very similar to that, right? We talked about that we don't collect money. So the ambulance service, whether it be private, whether it be Chesterfield County who does revenue recovery, whether it be the volunteers that do revenue recovery to try to offset the costs of doing business, how do we increase their revenue yet lower the cost to the consumer, right? And so we have a consumer that's having, a diabetic problem, and they're having a hard time controlling their sugar. If we could set up a system where we could we offer, one of our suggestions is a community paramedic program where they can go out, talk to them, set up doctor's appointments for them, and get them the care they need that way versus going there and the only option they have is I can take you to the hospital or I don't take you to the hospital. And so if I take you to the hospital, it's a $1,000 charge just for that, and then the emergency department charge just to get you your medicines or whatever you need, versus if we had a community paramedic program where we could get the paramedic that goes out there, talks to the patient, sets up an appointment, coordinates a ride, which they're either their insurance or Medicaid or however it works will cost them $50. And then maybe we charge a little bit of money. So instead of charging $1,000, and then we'll use, what do we use, Medicare or private insurance? They paid $1,000 for the ambulance. They pay $5,000 for an emergency visit. We have to get them back home, and they still haven't gotten the correct care. So one of the thought processes is having a community paramedicine program that can be reimbursed, because currently right now that process cannot be reimbursed.
And that's really the problem. That's what we need to fix, the reimbursement.
Yeah, just the reimbursement model. Now, we did discuss that insurance companies are starting to come around and looking at reimbursing, but we have to find the model that works for that. What can we bill appropriately that they'll reimburse us for without, we want it to be appropriate for both ends, right? We want it to be appropriate for the consumer, for the insurance companies, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, whatever it is. We want to leverage that money in the best proper way so that, the patient and the consumer wins, because we know that if costs go up, of course, all of us eat that as taxpayers and consumers, wherever we're at.
Because I know our listeners, they're listening in and they're like, I just want to be able to dial 911 and have a paramedic, EMT come to my house, take care of the emergency situation, if necessary, transport me to the hospital. And quality is the most important thing at that point. Like they would love,
Yes.
We would all love to have a doctor come out in that ambulance every single time, but that would be cost prohibitive and that would probably never happen. There's probably a limitation. I mean, we probably don't even have the number of doctors that we could do that with, for one. So what you're saying is let's have more options. Let's just not have a one-size-fits-all approach, right? Let's have one, if you dial 911, then the EMT is able to, are you saying triage pretty much at that point and determine if it's a diabetic situation? Are you saying they could take them to the doctor? I mean, take them to the doctor's office.
Right. Is that an option that we have? Or that's number one. I think that's an option that we need to create is allow us to be able to either transport someplace else or get reimbursed if we don't transport, right? Because we've done the right thing. We've treated them appropriately. We've had the most experience, just like you said. I want a quality person to come, give me the right chance. And it's a very difficult thing. It does come down to tort laws, right, and liability. And we need to make sure we address that so that there's no liability if we've done all the right things. It's like any other medicine. So we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. And that's where the blend comes in. So the key would be is if we had this community paramedicine program, we do the follow-up on the back end, right? We connect ourselves with emergency departments or cardiologists or nephrologists or whatever the case is, these endocrinologists for diabetics, and then we go visit them, and that's not a 911 call. That is a setup, hey, I want you to follow up on these patients that we've gone to. Or I've come to Amanda Chase's house for several times in a row because she's having difficulties for whatever the reason is. We come, we sit down, we talk, we find out what those are, and I come to find out you had no way to get your medicine. I now find a solution to getting you your medicine. It's just that you had no ride, you had no way to get there, you had a doctor that would prescribe it, you just couldn't take it. So your end result is dial 911. And so can we cut down those 911 costs? I've had the fortune of working for other agencies, and you have that readmission rate. And of course, you probably heard that in the legislature where hospitals get dinged from Medicare for readmissions. Well, let's cut those back and get that funding that they save back to paramedicine because we cut back those readmission rates, which is good for everybody.
Now, are there any other states in the U.S. that are already doing this? There's
a couple of states. Community paramedicine or mobile integrated healthcare is across the nation. It's just that the reimbursement model is not there. That is the challenge. And so I know there's two states that I remember we shared them with you. I can't remember exactly the states. I think one was Minnesota, but I don't remember the two states off the top of my head. And there's two states that have it in their regulations that they allow for, at least in the state Medicaid pool, that they've found a way to reimburse us to a part, and it's not fully. I don't know how they did it, but that's just one thought process.
Well, it's good to be creative and come up with new solutions for sure, because what we're finding is that one size fits all is so cost prohibitive, and if people are already calling it, I think one of my concerns could be, would the system be abused for just people saying, "Hey, I just need a ride to the doctor. I'm going to dial 911."
And that's not what we want, right?
Yeah.
That's not what we want. The thought process here is we wanted to eliminate those calls. How can we get the calls? We want 911 to be 911, and that's what we kind of when you were graciously enough to come out. We want 911 to be that. We already have the catch-all from all your doctor's visits and pharmacies and dentists and all the places that tell you to call 911 if it's an emergency. We want to get away. Hey, call us if it's an emergency. Call us. Do not hesitate. Do not wait. Do not think about it. Because if you're waiting, your heart disease or your heart muscle, your brain muscle, time is brain and time is heart and time is an injury. You're bleeding. Don't wait. Call 911 right away. Do not worry about the bill. Let's get you the proper care. You want that experienced person coming that we've trained and educated, and that's really important.
Very good. Well, the next thing is a very serious subject that I want to talk about. I know that you all probably see a lot of this as EMTs, and that's domestic violence, sexual assault. And I do want to give you all a domestic abuse hotline number that's free. It's 24/7. It's 800-799-7233. It's 800-799-7233. I always talk on the show about different issues that I see come up for the week. And this is something that I've spent a lot of time on this week is instances of domestic violence. So let's just talk a little bit about what is domestic violence. And it's actually the willful intimidation, physical assault, battery, sexual assault, or any other type of abusive behavior as part of a systematic pattern of power and control. And it's usually perpetuated by one intimate partner against another. So a lot of times it's, husbands and wives or significant others. And it includes physical violence, sexual violence, threats, and emotional abuse. It's not always just physical abuse. And the frequency and the severity of domestic violence, which can vary dramatically. And that's according to the 2017 annual report that was published in 2018 by the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Law. And so let's talk a little bit about domestic violence. What percentage of the calls would you say that you take in are somehow domestic?
I would say it's much smaller. A lot of times we're seeing the injuries, right? So we're not going to see the verbal abuse that you referred to and issues like that. So when we're called, someone is injured, and generally they want to be transported to the hospital. Occasionally police will call us and have us evaluate someone prior to either taking them into being in custody or the other side just to make sure they're okay. But we see it, I wouldn't say it's a huge majority of our calls, but it's not infrequent either.
It's interesting. Domestic and sexual violence, they affect our families, our homes, our communities, our schools, and our workplaces on a daily basis. And a lot of times, I think sometimes we underestimate how common and frequent this is. Domestic and sexual violence impacts all socioeconomic levels. It doesn't matter, what neighborhood, what your zip code is. It affects all socioeconomic levels, cultures, and even religion. And I found that, in churches, you actually would be surprised at how much domestic violence and sexual assault there is. And so it's tragic, and it's something we need to talk about. I'm going to give you the number again. It's 800-799-7233. That's the domestic abuse hotline. We're going to talk about this a little bit more in the final segment on Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back with the final segment of Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase today, talking about a very difficult and somber topic, domestic violence. And I want to give you the domestic abuse hotline. If you or someone you love is physically assaulted, the worst thing you can do is be silent. It is so important at the moment that it happens that you call and file a police report. There is a statute of limitations of 1 year for misdemeanors. And so, if you wait too long and you eventually get brave enough to report, when you go outside that 1 year time period, you can't get justice. So That domestic abuse hotline, again, it's free. It's 24/7. It's 800-799-7233. And that's 1-800-799-7233. You can just Google Virginia domestic violence, sexual assault, and you'll find the number right there. And, the sad part is that it's so hidden. Like John and I were saying, it's a lot of people feel embarrassed. They feel humiliated. Why is this happening to me? Am I doing something to cause this to happen to me? And they're embarrassed about it because they feel humiliated that this is happening. So whether the impact is open and obvious, such as a tragic homicide that receives media attention and spurs a community action, or hidden and subtle, such as the emotional and psychological effect on children who silently live with the violence, domestic and sexual violence can penetrate even the deepest level of our society. I have some interesting statistics here. These are crimes in Virginia, and this is according to a recent report from the Attorney General's office. In 2016, there were more than 62,000 calls to domestic and sexual violence hotlines across the state. 62,000, that's a lot. And a total of 3,100 adults and 2,500 children received 191,000 nights of emergency or temporary shelter due to domestic violence. And the sad part is that there are about 2,000 families requesting shelter services were turned away due to lack of shelter space. This is how common this is. Now, this week, I sat with a victim that, if something happens to you and it's outside of regular working hours, you can actually file and get an emergency protective order by going to a magistrate right there at the Chesterfield County Sheriff's Department. It's to the right of the building. You can go there and there's a magistrate that's there that you can talk to if you need an emergency protective order, and that's basically a 3-day order, and the magistrate will listen to your situation and determine if an emergency protective order is deemed necessary or appropriate. And if it is granted, it's for 3 days. And there's another one you can then file to get a permanent protective order, which is every 3 years, and you have to renew that 3-year order. And so there are judges across the Commonwealth to protect the immediate health and safety of victims and their family members. And, during 2017, the General Assembly passed legislation to continue and improve and strengthen the law surrounding domestic and sexual violence. And in fact, there was a bill that expanded access to address confidentiality program, and it's House Bill 2217 for victims of sexual assault and human trafficking, and created an application assistant program to provide access to application assistant programs via local domestic and sexual violence programs. We're going to talk about this when I come back. It won't be next Friday, so you'll hear this recording next week, but the week after we'll be back, and I'm really going to have some great resources here in the studio here to talk to us more about this really severe and common problem of sexual and domestic violence. Until next week, stay tuned for more Cut to the Chase with Senator Chase. Have a great week.